let me start. My name is Bhuplesh Gupta. I am Vice President at ZEN EB5. ZEN EB5 is a collection of EB5 funds which work with developer in Phoenix for the real estate development projects. But today we are not talking about projects. We have more serious topics to discuss today, which is the topic of the time, like retrogressions, policy changes, and September 2026 deadline. So we have a panel, Phuong Lee from KLDP and Carl from EB5 Coast to Coast. Now, these people don't need any introduction, but still for the audience, maybe you can say some words.
Sure, I'll kick off. My name's Carel van der Merwe. I'm with EB5 Coast to Coast. We're essentially, EB5 Coast to Coast has two lines of business. We own regional centers that cover the country. So we have national regional center coverage. And through those various regional centers, we sponsor dozens of projects, essentially providing a compliance service for developers, fundraisers to raise capital under our regional center. And then, we do also raise capital for select projects. We have 3 projects in the market right now that we're raising funds for.
By the way, EB5 Coast to Coast is our regional center. They are sponsoring all of 3 projects which we have, Zenet Skyview, Zenet Desert Sky, and Zenet Legacy.
It's a great, yes, absolutely.
Call on this panel
should
today.
Mention that.
No worries. Phuong, maybe you know?
Yeah.
Phuong needs no introduction.
No, I'm just like anyone else. Thank you, Bhuplesh, for organizing this and inviting Carel and me and Nero. Nero can't join today because he decided on today of all days that he's going to try to be a good husband and go to dinner with his wife. So it'll just be me today. But I am one of the partners at KLDP. We do EB5 on all levels. So happy to join and happy to give you our thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Phuong. So folks, this is going to be a very conversational, open-ended discussions where we'll be talking about certain topics, but you feel free to post your questions in the Q&A sections, and we will be taking questions throughout this session. So starting with the topic about the policy changes, the recent policy changes on H-1B, the gold card, the platinum card, and very recent EAD changes, the auto renewal. So maybe let's start with Phuong. Okay, what's your take on all of this? Like, what do you think the investor should look for?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of there in immigration law. I mean, it's funny because immigration law doesn't change very much, right? But what changes, I always say, is the administration and the agency's policies and what they're looking out for. And some administrations are more immigrant friendly, and some are not so immigrant friendly. This is definitely an agency, a time when I think we can all agree that it's much more anti-immigrant, unfortunately, than most. If you look at the scale and the type of changes we've been seeing since Trump 2.0, we see an administration that is, for better, for worse, definitely for worse. The amount of policies they're pushing out to kind of just disrupt people's everyday lives, I mean, it's becoming very noticeable. And it used to be that it was just mostly quote unquote illegal immigration, but now you're seeing them attack the H-1B program, acting like it's an adversarial program or that you're harming the U.S. economy, even though it's clearly not true. Things like announcing $100,000 fee change on a Friday afternoon when folks are flying through the air. This new announcement about EADs no longer auto-renewing for whatever reason, right? Announcing yesterday, nonsensical. And the thing is this, it's almost like their whole approach, and this is what they did last time too, is shock and awe. We're going to throw out so many changes at a dizzying pace that even though if we're wrong on some of them, you guys can't possibly go after everything, right? And so I think what we see here is a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty. And then to the extent that whatever you can do to kind of protect yourself, get some stability, I think you do it now.
Right. And I don't think so. Some of these things are well thought through before they talk about it. For example, I think the biggest blunder was the H-1B where president announced something and there was a big chaos everywhere. And the next day they released a clarification on what what that means. So looks like clearly the agencies and the administrations are not on the same page all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? Because I know we're in a consumer culture where everything happens in real time, right? No one has any patience anymore, including me. So you see these announcements, and immediately the first thing is, so what happens now? How does this affect me? How does how should we prepare for this? To be honest with you, and I know this sounds odd, but sometimes the answer is don't do anything yet. Just let it run its course. I know people want answers within 24 hours, but sometimes there's no answers within 24 hours. And in a way, that's okay. Let it play out. Let it settle down. Because I think in a normal situation, before you pass any kind of new rule, there's notice and comment. You have people give a heads up. The industry gives its feedback, right? And then the agents will typically take into account and maybe modify a little bit. Here, what we're seeing is they're clearly just rolling it out. And for example, like the $100,000 H-1B fee, over the course of a weekend, they must have released 4 or 5 different explanations from it, right? From their press release secretary to the Twitter account to everything in between, modifying it and everything else. So I think a lot of these policies hopefully will be rolled back or overturned. Certainly, the $100,000 fee is being sued right now. So I expect a lot of these things to be hugely watered down, if not overturned. This one, the travel ban, and some other ones. But in the short term, it is stressful, I understand, for families. So it's going to cause some white hairs.
Right, right, good. But now the bigger question is, what's the impact of these policy changes on EB5? And that's where I come to you, Carl, because you represent one of the largest regional centers in US. So how does EB5 Coast to Coast sees these policy changes as impact to the EB5 program in general?
Yeah, well, we've certainly, with it back in when was January, February, when then Trump initially announced the gold card, and now also recently with the H-1B fee announcement, it's definitely spurred a lot more interest in EB5 for obvious reasons. I think, concern about the H-1B program, concern about EB5 program potentially going away or prices going up. So it's been, there's been a lot more activity. And I think, everyone in the industry will probably testify to that, particularly H-1Bs, Indian H-1Bs. From what I understand, the majority of H-1Bs in the US are Indian. I think there's something like 300,000 H-1Bs in the US. So it's a huge market. And, that's where the bulk of the inquiry is coming from. So, yeah, I think so. That's the most obvious impact we've seen, is that there's a lot more interest in EB5 right now.
That's true. I mean, I also can vouch for that. Like in last, whenever there is certain announcement, the surge of calls to me just goes away right away. People are more worried.
Yeah.
Okay, what's going to happen? They want to invest right away into it, and I just tell them, yes, you should, but don't just make a decision in panic. Think to it. First of all, make sure that you have pretty good handle on your sources of fund, because USCIS is right now scrutinizing that thing very, very like deeply. And that's probably the next topic for us to discuss. Phuong, these days we are hearing that the USCIS is reviewing each and every application more carefully, which they used to do a little bit of pass on earlier. So what kind of sources of funds do you think are troublesome in these days, and what they should watch for?
Yeah, and I'll happy to answer the question, but before I do, I request you start giving the hard questions to Carol instead of me, right? So,
Don't worry,
Absolutely
there are a
not.
lot more.
no, I've known Carol for a long time, so I'm glad that he's in a good place right now. So good to see you again, Carol. So
You
here's
too,
the thing,
Phuong.
right? It's funny because I say this so often, but those of you who have talked to me before, when you ask me about certain things, I will tell you as an attorney, and I know I'm saying this as an attorney, but sometimes you kind of have to ignore the law, you know? Not because I'm trying to make you do something illegal or go to jail. No, I'm not saying that part. But I'm saying because sometimes, especially in the context of agency-driven law, and when I say agency law, I mean the SEC, the Food and Drug Administration, USCIS. It's so much is dependent on historical knowledge of the kind of things that they've kind of looked out for over the years, their current processing trends, what hot button issues they're really going after. And those things happen, they constantly move in flux all the time. So what was sound advice or even settled policy a year ago can change within a blink of a month. And so what we're seeing is, so for more context, yes, I think the way the service is adjudicating petitions all across the board, and now including EB5, they're much more aggressive, right? They're much more aggressive. They're much more willing to even skip RFEs and go to noise. And there's a couple major reasons for that besides the policy change. One is from what I understand, there was a major upheaval, a turnover of a lot of the USCS adjudicators. And the reason why this happened is we have our friend Elon and Doge to thank for this. So when he went through this whole cost-cutting measure of let me eliminate all these different positions and efficiency and whatever else, one thing he also did is essentially eliminate a lot of people, a lot of employees and adjudicators who have had decades of experience. People who I think part of this, you guys have to understand this. There are certainly bad adjudicators, but there are certainly, I think, good adjudicators and people who are just human. So when they're going through this, when they're trying to figure out, I think over time, when you first look at EB5, everything looks shady. That's just how it is, right? Even though it's not. But over time, adjudicators, I think they understand that here's the gray area. Remember, the standard evidence is preponderance, 51%. And so there's a back and forth between USCS and stakeholders in industries such as us, where we generally know what's going to be acceptable. Nowadays, what we're seeing is, and there have been several, whispers about this, if not confirmation, but there was a policy memo back in 2018 where there was a directive where essentially adjudicators are being told, don't even bother issuing RFEs and notes. If you want, you go straight to denial. Whereas before, they were much more willing to issue RFEs and let people work through issues. But now that's an example of a policy change. It's much more anti-immigrant. And so what we're seeing is a couple of things, right? One is adjudicators who clearly either have no experience reviewing basic financial documents, or even it's not clear if they even read the documents at all. We've had people who, for example, it's very common for a lot of folks, for example, to work for a company that is pre-IPO. And when you work there, you get, RSU grants or whatever else that might vest later on when it goes public. We're seeing things like USCS questioning, and even though they vest later on, say years after they leave, we've seen USCS question that, well, this looks like unlawful employment. It looks like unlawful employment.
Okay, so while he comes back, okay, he's here. Sorry, Phuong,
Okay,
we
I was
lost
all
you for
confused. I was confused. Sorry. I don't know how long that pause was for, but basically, we're seeing things like they're claiming people have unlawful employment for RSUs in a previous company that vested later on. And it's almost, you're like, do I have to explain to you that this is just stocks that I'm getting later on and that sort of stuff? Another thing we definitely see is that a recent trend is they're much more aggressive about forcing people, for those who are doing supplemental filings, to identify clearly the source of funds for the later investment and include enough sufficient evidence where they can identify it, right? And on top of that, there's definitely a trend for them to want people to invest sooner rather than later, because they're claiming when they pick up the case. So it's twofold. One, they pick up the case, you're not fully funded, and they claim that you're not eligible. But on the other hand, it's very odd because it seems like USCS is adjudicating cases extremely fast now, right? 6 to 8 months is not unusual. So those are things that you have to be aware of as you're preparing your case. So lately, what we've been doing is, if you are doing a partial investment, for example, we're saying that with the initial filing, we want to clearly lay out what funds you will be using to invest later on, so we can essentially assess fair market value. We were putting a clear funding deadline in there. And ideally, what we were doing is having people fully fund before 6 months, just to be safe. They're wrong on this issue, right? But we think to be safe, the way it is right now, we're going to proceed in that manner.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. And I also talked to a lot of people, and this is what I told him. Like, if you asked me a few months ago, 6 months probably was okay, but now you need to do it faster because USCIS is going little crazy on approvals, which is a good news. You're getting your
Yeah,
approvals
it's
pretty
both.
fast.
It's both. It's very
Right.
odd,
It
right?
always comes like everybody likes it. In fact, the gap between HUA and right now rural is probably not there. Like it's very, very narrow. That's an opportunity for everybody to get their at least their petitions approved, but it also creates a problem if you are not having a good handle on your sources of money and you're planning for a long horizon for your investment.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very odd because you're right, because part of it is, on one hand, it seems like they're very anti benefits, anti-immigrants in general, and much more aggressive. But on the other hand, approvals when they're coming in are oddly very, very fast. Like I hesitate to say this because I'm gonna say this, but if anyone asks if their case is gonna be approved the same way, I'm just gonna hang up on you. But this morning, for example, we had an HQA investor that we filed October 7th this month. It was approved today. That's that
Wow.
Wow.
that makes no sense to me, right? Which is probably one of the fastest approvals we've ever had. And I mean, it's literally
23
like,
days.
looks there. I can't take credit for everything, right? I mean, sometimes you get lucky, and I think it's just crazy. But yeah,
No, I think one thing is like if your source of fund documentation and the whole trail is very well done, then yes, it adds to it. But then on top of that, there are many factors.
yeah.
You can't say that you don't take credit. You you definitely are part of it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's fast, but I can't guarantee 30 days fast. Okay, like we'll do our best, guys, but there's no way I can do 30 days fast. So,
Right,
That's impressive though. That's got to be close to an industry record because I've not heard anything as quick as that. That's impressive.
right.
yeah, but like part of it is like I wonder if we're doing this right. I almost feel like it's fine to kind of talk about partial investments and funding later on, but now I almost feel like if you're going to do this, really do need to be able to fund within like 90 days in case something happens,
Yeah.
Yep,
just because
yep.
of what we're seeing.
That's true. That's true. In fact, there was
I
one
just
discussion between
just to maybe add to something Phuong
yes,
was
yes,
saying
please.
in terms of sort of the scrutinize the sort of adjudication standards getting a lot tougher. We're certainly seeing that as well in terms of project applications. And they are also going to Noids a lot more easily than they did in the past, and they're particularly scrutinizing the capital stack and making sure that the capital stack is secure, it's in place. I mean, previously you could, for example, have a term sheet from a bank and just say, this is the bank financing. We've got a term sheet. Now they want to see, the bank financing being secured already. So it's definitely the standard is higher now in terms of getting your project application approved. And but once you have an approved project, which you now have published, project 2 of them, that's very valuable because if you look at the actual approval rate for 5 to 6s, that's still really high. It's 95% plus. So I think this more scrutiny on the project has resulted in higher quality projects getting approved, and that's certainly benefiting investors in terms of the 5 to 6 approval. So
Right.
I mean, and Phuong, you can explain this better than I can, but pre-RIA, right? Your 5 to 6 was adjudicated with the project as well included, and the approval rates weren't nearly as high as they are now because it was there was a lot more to adjudicate, and if there was an issue with the project, it impacted the 5 to 6 approval.
Yeah.
So now investors are quite rightly focusing on projects that are already approved, and that's certainly resulting in a much higher overall approval rate for investors. So
Right.
I think the sort of a two-phase approach is very beneficial.
Yes. And in fact, I was saying that today morning we had a conversation in one of the WhatsApp group, and the talk was about HUA and rural, the processing time. And one gentleman posted a link about some of the data. I actually will share some of that, but you can see it if you see my screen. You can see as per the data published in that article, there is literally no difference between HUA and rural timelines. Like both are more or less same. So I still keep on hearing from people that, hey, rural is processed way faster, HUA takes very long. This data does not tell that. This data tells, okay, both are on par of each other. Like if rural takes 6 months, HUA is also coming to 6 months. If rural takes 10 months, for example, for here for many, then by the way, these are average numbers. There are exceptions. Some are getting even faster, but on an average, they are on par.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, by the way, those of you who know me know I hate of there's no debate I hate more than this whole rural high unemployment thing, right? So, I mean, because the reason why is that why is it always either or? I've always cautioned people about rushing into picking a project just for the reserve category, without considering whether the project is good to begin with, right? Always pick a good project first and a category
Right.
second.
Yeah.
What's the other thing that I've also said though, and it's so to be fair, this is a sampling of data, but this our own experience and those of our friends at other firms kind of confirms this too. Um, Generally speaking, in the RIA, rural 526Es are supposed to have priority processing, right? And I'm sure they do to whatever degree. But the difference between 526E processing times for rural and urban has largely closed for the most part.
Yep.
Um, our in our own experience, we have plenty of rural investors being approved in the 6 to 9 month mark. We have plenty of HOA investors being approved in the 8 to 12 month mark, right? And we have some rural investors that are over a year and a half, same as HOA. But largely, they're all more compacted than they're not. And of course, we have crazy things like today where, we also had now that I think about another HOA approval in about 3 months just a month ago. But again, there's always going to be crazy things like that, right? And we have a rural approval as well, but it's really weird because it used to be such a big. Most USCS adjudications are bunched tightly in the middle. This I've never seen. This is a wide gap. So maybe there's one person over there that's super efficient, and the rest of them are kind of okay. Who knows?
Right. Means there are always outliers. Like one project cannot just daunt the whole average. So I totally get you. By the way, we have one question which says, are all of these HUA approvals coming fast? Had full payment done while filing the application? Trying to understand the pattern.
There's no way to know, but I guarantee you that it really doesn't matter, right? So for our firm and from other firms, there's no discernible difference between approval time and whether it's supplemental or full funding. Because also you guys have to also understand that, I mean, this is how we approach it, Bhupesh and Carol. We tell what we tell our investors essentially is even though you're doing partial funding, the goal is always to fully fund your case well before USCS ever picks it up, right? You want essentially by the time they pick it up that it is a full case already. So then they're ready
Yes.
to approve. Um, and over the years there really is we see no difference, at least for us at least. So I can't speak for everyone.
Okay. So Carl, coming on to you on the same topic, because you also talk to a lot of investors directly. So what is your opinion on this thing? Like, what's your advice? Like, how soon they should be funding, if they are using a partial funding at all?
Yeah, no, I give the same advice Phuong was suggesting. You should be fully funded by the time you adjudicate it. And with industry timelines getting shorter and shorter, I was suggesting 3 months. It doesn't give you a lot of
Such a weird problem to
flexibility,
have,
but
right? Such a weird problem to have, right, Carol? It's like
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
everyone
Yeah.
complains about how slow USCS is, and now that they're fast, all hell breaks
Yeah.
loose, right? So that's what I
Yeah.
mean. It's you always have to adjust and be aware of the trends. And it's fine to take a stance, but you have to adjust with new data, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And my
But even
opinion
3 months is gives some people a little bit of flexibility. That's not that, it's gets you a 3 month earlier priority date than you would normally have if so that's still helpful.
right, right. And I was saying, in my opinion, I spoke with a lot of people, and some of them actually do have money available right now, but still they want to go as low as possible. So they don't want to invest all $800,000 right away. They want to see the pace of project, how it is progressing, because before they fully fund it. And sometimes actually they also want to uh, don't want to invest so that they can invest somewhere else while making money, and then fund the project.
Yeah. No,
So there are.
I've seen several of those situations, and I get it, right? And I get it. Sometimes what you want to do is, I get all the reasons why. There's a time cost to benefit to money, right?
Right.
If I invest it all with, say, Blueplesh now, then um, instead of spreading it out, I could have used this money to invest for 6 months and get whatever returns on my money, or maybe put it in high yield and give it to them, and then later on invest, right? Or I am afraid I don't really want to do this until I get at least my EAD or AP approval, and then I will fund the rest because now I think my case is safe. Ironically, though, in each of those situations, you are kind of causing more headaches and problems to yourself. And I think, as we all know, when we talk to investors, one of the things they always want to do is eliminate risks and uncertainty. But what you're doing though is exactly the opposite. You are injecting risks and uncertainty, right? I understand the whole thing of I don't want to invest the full amount until I see some sort of progress or money or my EAD. But if you really had that issue, my advice would be you should pick another project or don't invest at all because you're kind of screwing both sides, right? Like it's the project needs your money to genuinely build. And if you're doing this, you're creating more headaches for yourself. Same thing with people. We've had a couple of investors try to do this thing where, some are very aggressive traders and some think they're a little bit more safe or smarter because they're putting it in just a high yield. But a lot of things can happen, right? A lot of things can happen. You don't know if it's really going to play out that way. So if you're
Right.
going to do EB5, I would say there is some tax planning involved, but be at peace with the fact that you're going forward with this investment.
Yep. Yep. I totally get it, and I also say that you cannot fight with what's going on right now. The only thing is you can take an action, like
Yeah.
make a
Yeah.
peace with these dates, whatever is going on, and move. At least take action. Okay, another question. There are actually a bunch of questions. Phuong, is there any concern of using self-directed IRAs from old employers? I heard some of the attorneys are cautioning that they can be denied at 829 stage.
My question to them is for what reason, right? So, and again, I don't speak for other attorneys, right? If you are represented by other counsel, you should definitely talk to them. And if you guys don't agree, then my thing is this: there's a lot of things you can do in EB5, right? Different strategies to use and everything else. And sometimes what people like to do is spend a lot of time debating this or which one is better or whatnot or which one is safer. But our not just my fundamental rule, but like our firm's fundamental rule, me and Neuron and everyone on our team is look, if you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, don't do it. Just don't do it, right? No one's making you. So if for me though, so whenever people say things like this, it's fine to have a stance or opinion, but my basic question is, what exactly is the risk and for what reason do you think this will be denied, right? And is it addressable? If it's some sort of nebulous, wishy-washy thing like, well, I don't know because they actually haven't gone through the 829 stage yet. I don't know how it's gonna like. I mean, sure, I guess so, right? Um, then that attorney should not do it. We personally feel very comfortable with it. We have a very specific argument or justification of why it can be done, right? Uh, in short, do we think SDRAs are safe in approval? Yes. And simply for the reason of, if you look at it from a big picture level, is it money that's lawful? Yes. generally speaking, a lot of these are going to be W-2 income IRAs rolled over, or if it's a 401k account, it's all paycheck deductions. It's all W-2 paycheck deductions. Then you're rolling over account, and who owns that account? The investor owns that account, right?
Yep.
So I don't
Right.
have an issue with it. I can go on and on about it, but I don't. I
I
want to give
know
Carol.
we have shortage of time and we have a lot to cover. So
I
now
told you, you let me
shifting
go. I keep
gears,
going. So
yeah, shifting gears to retrogression, which is another hot topic these days. Now, Carl, I'll come to you first. So what's your opinion? Like, is it really going to happen, or it just a scare in the in the community?
No, I mean, on paper, we are retrogressed, right? Already in both categories, I think rural and high unemployment, but it's just taking longer than all the experts had predicted to show up in, in paper. So, I remember, early last year, we were predicting summer of last year, we were going to see retrogression. And then, and then it was going to be this summer. Now we're in the fall, and it still hasn't come. So, I mean, my prediction, for what it's worth, is maybe next summer. But it's there are so many variables and factors that we don't really know. It's very hard to be very accurate on this. But certainly there's a lot of, I think there's 9,000 5 to 6s that are pending at the moment. That's a huge number. So if that was all processed, within the next month, of course we're going to have retrogression, but it's just, that's
Right.
not going to happen either. So it is there in theory. Well, not in theory. There is retrogression right now, but it's not going to show up for some time. I think it's going to be
Right.
quite a while before we actually see it.
Yeah. So if you look at the visa bulletin, I don't see it, and I don't see it's happening because USCIS is not approving with the same pace that they will approve 10,000 petitions every year. But the question comes up, if there is such a big backlog and USCIS is approving faster. In fact, that's one of the questions over here. Do you think it's going to accelerate the retrogression?
Yeah, in theory it should, right? The faster they adjudicate but it's also going to depend on, how fast the actual visa processing takes place. So I don't know, Phuong, if you may have a better sense of this, but I defer to the experts on this because it's very hard for me
I
to
wanted
try and
Carol to
figure
talk
out.
so I could take a break.
I note that the experts have been wrong on this as well. Everyone had expected
Well,
us to
I
see it
mean,
by now.
let me give you my opinion. And Carol, your answer is perfectly fine. You're being honest and everything else. When I think retrogression will happen, I don't know, man. I don't know. I honestly don't know, right? Nor in a way do I kind of care, because that's not really how we build our strategies around this. What I will say though is that, so it's funny because we have been consistently saying this, and it's not like so we again at any given time we don't have a problem taking a stance or giving you our opinion, but we will also give a justification for it. When all this news about, I mean, it was December of last year when DOS announced on the visa bulletin, and it's really just almost like a footnote, right? Look, basically EB5 seems to be pretty popular, and we see a bunch of applications coming in. At some point, we may have to institute a final action date, a cutoff, right? A backlog. Um, Half the people looked at that line and decide, oh, it's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen in 2 months. So you better hurry up and invest, or else you're going to be screwed. And Nara and I were looking at it, and what we thought was like, what in the world are you guys talking about, right? Like, how did you get this conclusion? In our opinion, and we've said this since December of last year, it would not surprise us if EB5 was current through all of 2025, right? Like how we're doing right now. And the reason why for that is very simple. Um, for a backlog to happen, right, it's not just limited visas. You actually have to use up all of these EB5 visas. You need to have a ton of 45 approvals. The consulate in Mumbai, right, or the consulate in Guangzhou or whatever has to issue a ton of EB5 visas. and we were just not seeing it. And I think by most metrics, we're considered one of the most active uh, firms, and also in terms of filing volume. And we were just not seeing it, right? And on top of that, which played out later on, um, it's funny because they're reserved categories, but USCIS doesn't necessarily have to assign someone to a reserved category. And that's exactly what we're seeing when some of the data is being released. So it's possible for your 526Es to be approved and you get your conditional green card or whatnot, but they end up using, through their own choice, an unreserved visa, right? And for those of you wondering why they may do this, it's kind of in USCIS's best interest to prevent a backlog, actually. Remember, they're completely funded by filing fees. And for those of you who've got the EB5, you know the EB5 filing fees are significantly higher than everything else. So by using the unreserved visas, you are preventing a backlog for quite some time. It would not surprise me if there was not a backlog for next year, depending on how things go because of this, right? That's what I mean. Like, you're going to drive yourself crazy. It doesn't help, you know? So I think you make peace with your decision, and then you go from there, because otherwise, who knows? Who really
Right.
knows?
Yes, that's well said, both Carl and Phuong. Like, make peace and move
Make
forward.
peace.
Otherwise,
There's a
these
lot of
skins
things to
will
be
be
stressed
haunting
about.
you all
Yeah,
the time.
correct.
Right. Okay. Now, I know we only have about 20 minutes left, but we have to cover one most important topic. We are just 11 months away from the September 30th, 2026 deadline, which ends the grandfathering protection on the EB5 program. May Can you tell something about that, like what it is and why, means what investors can do right now to make sure that their applications are in and they're covered?
Yeah, I
Carl?
mean, as long as you file prior to the grandfathering date, you have to, by law, be processed. And so obviously it's a year prior to the program lapsing in September of 27. I think most people in the industry feel pretty confident that the program is going to be renewed, but it's not a given. And certainly, you know, with Trump's, you know, administration pushing the gold card, that is potentially, you know, a threat to the EB5 program. But, you know, so I think that is, you know, a lot of people are very fixated on, rightly so, on I think on the grandfathering date for that reason. I personally, I think the program's going to be renewed. I think, you know, it's always had a lot of bipartisan support. It's a job creating program. So it's creating jobs in all of these states. And that's, you know, that's going to get the congressional support. And because of the rural component now, you know, we've got a lot broader support for EB5 than we've had in the past. So whereas the gold card, you know, that's just in theory is going to reduce the federal debt. It's not creating jobs. It's not something that congressmen are really going to get behind, because there's no benefit to them, you know, for their state to just reduce the federal deficit. So I just think, you know, the EB5 has got, you know, they've started lobbying already, but it's got pretty broad support. And so I do believe that the program will be reauthorized. But, you know, anyone that's, you know, I think anyone that's, you know, from a sort of risk mitigation point, you should certainly look to file prior to the grandfathering date, because it isn't a given.
Right. And it's maybe a little funny to even assume that the gold card or the platinum card would ever be able to fill the deficit of $35 trillion. No way. No way that's gonna happen.
Oh, like who wants to come to America for like $5 million? It's dumb. Like, if you do
Right.
that, you use a bad decision making. Like, what's wrong with you, right? Like, if I had $5 million, I'd live in whatever country I would live in, and then just get a tourist visa. Like, why would you give it away? That makes no sense. That's just fundamentally like wrong thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
know,
Yeah,
Fong,
well, I think
what
they
happens?
recognized that they were so overly optimistic. I mean, when they announced a $5 million gold card, and then, you know, more recently they said, well, it's 1 million, 2 million, and 5 million categories. So, you know, I think, you know, that there's no appetite for a gold card at 5 million.
It's
Yep.
like
So
they're releasing a credit card program, right? Where all the options are really bad. Like who wants this stuff? Like nobody wants this stuff, right?
yeah,
All these versions, all these flavors are terrible. Like there's no point, you know. So I mean, Carol's such a nice guy. He's being diplomatic. You know, there's no guarantee it'll be approved, no guarantee it'll be extended. It's gonna be extended. It's gonna be extended, right? And so um it's like, I mean, it's funny because my wife has had to deal with this for so long, where, you know, like we deal with the industry where it's expiring all the time, and she doesn't know if it's okay or we're gonna be homeless and everything else. And we've been doing this for 20 years, right? I'm like, just make peace with yourself. It's gonna be there. Um,
Right.
Although, so my thing is this: if you're really risk averse, you're scared. Obviously, it's the same advice as always, right? With you have 100 uncertainties in this column, but there's one thing you can easily do to eliminate essentially 99% of them, and that is essentially file before September 2026. So if you're really serious about taking the first most obvious step, you do that, right? And then you can talk about the rest of the stuff later on. Um, but the other thing is this. I think we would have been confident about the extension before, but we are even more confident about it, like than ever, and for lots of reasons, right? So let me give you some, let me peel back the curtain and give you some insights on some of the other stuff that's going on. Um, the last time that, so for the RIA, that's the first time that the EB5 industry had ever gone through the whole legislative process, the lawmaking process. And I think for what it's worth, um, I think it's fair to say that for the most part, we got our butts kicked, right? Like it's passing a law is extremely hard, extremely dirty, extremely like tiring process. There's so much back and forth, so many backroom like agendas and everything else, so many side deals. And there were revisions and changes, additions really up until like the night before. Um, and the industry itself back then had a lot of competing interests. I think this time around, a lot of the industry has essentially grown up. It's much more professional. You know, it's much more institutionalized. Um, you have more people who look like Carol, right? Uh, but now we're taking what I like to see though is that, so one of the things that we've done when we went through that whole process was we're like, it's we don't want to be in a reactive state again. So we know reauthorization is coming. So one of the things that's important to us is to be involved, right? You want to have a seat in the room where all this happens. You want to have a voice. Not to say that you control things, but I think a lot of us feel now that, so talks, we already have talks underway, for example, with several factions in Washington D.C. about extending the program. Uh, Industry has hired lobbyists. We have contributed as a firm greatly to certain lobbying groups with the intention of getting in front of Congress with extending things. There are, I think, shortly people will probably start drafting early versions of the bills and proposals for circulation. All this, in my opinion, is a positive thing, right? 90% of it may eventually go away. 90% of it may not be used, but it forces the issue. It brings the issue to the forefront. The gold card, what it really did was bring, when we were there to discuss this with Congress back in February, they were all for it, but they told us like, let's discuss this later on. But then Trump announced the gold card, and that's really what it did was it accelerated this whole timeline of reauthorization. So all I can say it's currently underway, and there'll be a back and forth process, but you know we are pretty confident that it'll be extended in some form.
Great, great. So one question
that's
which
good.
people have is, what if they miss the deadline of September 30, 2026? I know the protection goes away, but they can still file it, right?
You can still file. And I think part of this is risk tolerance, right? I mean, there will still be people filing in after September 2026. I truly believe so. I think the industry will probably adapt as it always has to this sort of situation. Any risks, by the way, will probably have to be borne. So the thing is this, it's not like you can't, any risks will probably be borne by both or shared by both the regional center and the investor. So investors, if they go forward investing, one obvious thing I can think of is if the project does disappear or fail in the future, funds would be refunded essentially, right? So it has to be some sort of in between. So we'll see. The industry will figure
Okay,
something out. We always have.
all right. We have a bunch of questions to take. Before that, Carl, do you want to add anything to this topic?
No, I was just actually keen to get Phuong's thought on, I know with the gold card, they're basically taking the visas from EB1 and EB2 category, and there's backlogs there for China and India. And so, I mean, that's not going to go very well when someone invests in a gold card and figures out, he's got to wait for years. So I think that may force the issue of visa availability and addressing that as well. So that could be, positive for EB5 as well. So, um, that's certainly a possibility that I've heard people suggest could happen.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
In my opinion, it's very comical because it's almost like, and ironically, the architect behind this is supposedly a very experienced bond trader, right? A CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. All this is Howard Lutnick's fault, essentially, right? So it's just comical to me because in how do you come up with an investment immigration program or a way to pay down a national debt? And it's just all wrong at every single angle, right? Um, for example, like they had since February to now to come up with an approved gold card program, and the version they just announced, well, we'll do $1 million gold card, even though they complained it's too expensive before, and a $5 million platinum card, and this is a corporate card. But for the gold and platinum card, we're going to use the EB1 and EB2 categories. Anyone
Yes,
who's been involved in investment immigration would tell you're out of your mind. Like, why would you do that? This is the dumbest thing you can do. Why is it the dumbest thing you can do? Why would you tie your investment immigration program to why would you essentially from day one lock out to the biggest investor markets in the world? Like you can't make this up, right? Like why would you do this? It makes no sense. So it's not well thought out at all. And I think the more uncertainty that happens, it's funny because after all this stuff, you see all these different changes over here, but for everything that happens, EB5 is still largely stable. And it's always been kind of like that throughout time. So
right.
I don't think it's happening, Carol. I would bet strongly against it. And I have several bets with other people actually that it's not going to happen. So yeah,
Right.
it's a
All right,
good
now
water
I'll take a
talk. There's nothing.
bunch of questions before we wind up today. Generally, EB5 EAD is received in how many months? Also, is that affected by no automatic extension rule?
Let's give people some useful advice. So EADs, EADs are still coming in about 90 to 100 days. We've seen the new policy announcement about how you will no longer have automatic extension of EADs. Sucks, right? Nonsensical. It's not good policy. However, for the most part, as it is right now, we don't really expect a big impact on EB5 investors at least. EADs right now are being issued for 5-year increments, right? The hope is by the time you guys ever have to extend, you guys will have CPR. Now, if they keep if they get rid of the auto extension and they roll back EAD validity periods to 1 year at a time, then that's a problem, right? Because essentially you are it's so dumb because essentially what you're going to have is people with 1 year EADs, and every 6 months you're basically filing extension, which is like it's completely nonsensical. So I don't think it's going to get to that point, but this administration has surprised me on more than one time. So.
Okay, okay. A follow-up question on that. Once EAD and AP is obtained, do we still need to maintain the H-1B status?
Um, so this falls under the category of you don't, but there are reasons to consider, like take a step back and consider whether you want to do it or not, right? If you are truly risk averse, if you just want to be safe with no risk, right? It would make sense to yes apply for the EAD and AP through EB5, but stay in the H until you get conditional permanent residency. Then you get off of it. The EAD AP will essentially act as backup insurance. If you ever have to use it for whatever reason, then you have it. But that way you protect yourself or you guard against any kind of like, God forbid, any kind of denials or whatever else. And then you're able to stay here. And that would be the safest thing to do. Otherwise, if you really want to switch over to EAD and AP, sure.
Okay. Yep. Uh, maybe one of you want to take this question. What's the timeline or trend you have seen from 526 approval to conditional green card approval?
The fastest one we've had is 8 months, I think. But generally speaking, a year and a half to 2 years, not crazy. So anywhere between, we're having plenty of people. I mean, there are a variety of reasons for this, which I won't go into, but there are a number of people who, yes, they are getting. I never thought this would happen, but essentially CPR between the 12 to 15 month mark, which I think is crazy, right? I don't think this is reasonable to keep expecting that, but it is what we're seeing. But yeah, we still tell people, by the way, on every single consult about 2 years. Like, it's better to come in there with a somewhat conservative, reasonable expectation than to think that you are going to be one of the super fast ones.
Okay. So, Carl, maybe you want to answer this question. How much backlog can we expect for HUA project if we get into retrogression? Do you have any thoughts on that?
To be honest, I know. I mean, I read the blogs and see what the analysts are saying, but it's obviously a smaller category than rural, but it also depends on a lot of other factors. How fast you're getting processed, and rural there's a lot more filings in rural, I think, right now, because China and India definitely have a strong preference for rural, and they're getting processed very quickly. So that could result in that category filling up quite quickly. I don't really have a good sense for how long the backlog is going to be. But I can direct, I typically would just direct people to some of the analysts and just, feel free to read their blogs.
Attorneys can be wrong, right? Not all attorneys are equally knowledgeable, and attorneys aren't the gold standard, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's important to always, like for me, like I like to, one of the ways I make decisions, right, is I like to find certain opinions or analysis that I think are useful. And then at the end of the day, I will still make my own decision, right? I've always thought that people should do something very similar. So, you guys can decide whether you trust your attorney or your RC or your project sponsor, and you find someone that you think will tell you the honest truth, and you make decisions from there. So
Yep. The bottom line, which I actually advise to people I talk to, is though nobody can predict on these dates for HU and retrogression and rural and all, the underlying thing which is in your control, which you can look at, is the project metrics. Is the project looking good or not? Is the project creating jobs? Is the project progressing well? How's the capital stack looking? How's my capital protected? If those things are covered, I think this whole debate on rural versus HUA, it's moot at this point. Like, it's moving so crazily, nobody can predict anything. But if the project looks pretty strong, go ahead with that.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Right, because there is no end to this discussion. Like,
yeah,
everybody have their own arguments, and I don't want to get into that debate. Okay, you make your mind, whatever you decide, this is what we can offer, and that's the best we can do. Okay, thanks, Phuong and Carl, for joining today and giving your advice on all these topics.
Thank you for arranging this. It was great. Lovely being on here with you, Phuong.
Definitely. For sure. I'll see you around.
Thanks, guys.